Again, I'm going to say that your specificity of detail and the orderly way that you set scene is something that can be learned, but the fact that you have it in this way is just, you should write a lot.
Yes.
Yes. How much time do you have?
Thank you.
How did the writing help the healing?
Did the writing help the healing?
It was, yes, it was all related. It was kind of this meta experience because I was doing the work, getting the treatments and so forth, but I had started writing. So I wasn't really sure that the writing was doing the healing, but it was a product. I'd say it's a product of the healing. And so,
that's interesting.
But, and then related, I'll just say briefly, as I said, I was totally blocked. And then a month after, or 2 months after I had this accident, my brother, part of the amoeba, died really suddenly. I mean, it was the best he'd been doing in decades and died. It was really a random, shocking event for me. And a year later, I find myself writing a thank you note to our English teacher who'd shown up. I hadn't invited her, I hadn't seen her in 40 years. It was really wonderful. She knew my acupuncturist, so it's appropriate that I start talking about the accident with her. And then this channel just opened up. Never had access to it. It felt like grace. I mean, the lid blew off, and memories are coming out, connections. I had no internal critic. It was just totally flowing, beyond the bounds of the thank you note, so I sent that off. And I just kept writing, and of course it gets harder and so forth, but that's how it happened. And for me, I think it was getting in touch with that fear of vulnerability so still locked in my nervous system, somehow releasing that allowed me to take the chance to write. I think before then I was afraid of what I was going to confront in my writing, and I'd already looked at a windshield of a truck.
What else is there?
So it couldn't have gotten too much scarier than that until I got back to seeing my father's photograph, and it was a match for the truck.
Yeah.
But I think that was how it brought me back.
It really makes sense to me. I keep thinking in terms of your book of Shirley Jackson in her diary, in her journal, saying writing is the way out, writing is the way out, writing is the way out, and she didn't actually get out, because she died before she made that leap to write again. But that idea that for people for whom this is the drug of choice, it really is effective. Yeah.
Yes, I really totally, I agree, and it was something I'm just so absolutely grateful for, never expected in my life, and wonderful. Yeah,
That's great.
So appreciative.
So I feel as if there may be questions out here. There is.
Yeah. I have a question. As I'm also a memoir, so I'm teaching a course on memoir right now to graduate students. So one of my thoughts is, we craft ourselves and our family in the memoir. And I know in my own case, and then this is a kind of genre too, the memoir by a child who has had, sort of impressive parents, but also faulty parents, and the child both honors and attacks in a way, or critiques, or probes those parents. At the same time, perhaps you also protect them. So, to what extent? I mean, like in my book, I know. I mean, I'll say this after this whole group. The most horrible thing my mother ever said to me was, "You're not worth my little finger." Right. I mean, she loved me deeply. I did not put that in my memoirs because I did not want the character of my mother to have that degree of vulnerability. So to what, I mean, you're talking about a suicidal father, an alcoholic mother. To what extent are you exposing them? To what extent are you protecting them? And then in what light are you showing yourself? Were you aware of all these persona as characters or not as you wrote the book? I know, like all my friends thought I'd been really kind to my mother. Her friends thought I'd been part of her because I exposed family secrets. So, you know, it's a...
Well, that's a great question.
Anyway, there we are.
Yeah, let's see. I probably protected them a little. I mean, I could have, well, I mean, there were some things maybe I could have talked about in terms of, you know, in terms of my father. But I think that by the time, you know, I finished writing, or as I was writing, I felt I just understood them on a level that I didn't understand them before. And I really came to believe, and it wasn't sort of a justification, they absolutely did the best they could, and they had limited capacity. An alcoholic, someone struggling with mental illness. It was a God wonder. They raised 4 kids, and you know, we all, well, I had siblings with issues, but you know, they raised a family. So I think I couldn't. So in that sense, you know, I couldn't berate them or something, or be really, really angry because they had limited capacity. Although I think the fact that my mother didn't tell me at all until I was 16, I have a little, still a little anger, but they had their hands full. I mean, absolutely.
So we have time for one more back there. Okay.
I'm going with my feelings here and my own associations, but listening to you, you hit me because I'm feeling heavy. There's a heavy trauma. You express that, and lightness at the same time. And I'm listening to you, and I'm feeling light, and there's a lot of levity. So can you speak about your own levity and how that may have transformed you?
Well, my family, my father was very playful. So when he wasn't in a deep depression, he was actually kind of playful. And my mother had a very dry sense of humor. She was very funny. And my siblings also, you know, humor was our defense mechanism. The 4 of us laughing together was one of my favorite things ever. And so I think we all grew up, I mean, really seeing my father having such struggles, such depression. I mean, it would be so sad. And yet, he could also, you know, write a cartoon or do something playful at some point. And so the juxtaposition, I think, you know, I saw that was a way he could escape briefly. So, I mean, I just incorporated that for myself. Because frankly, life isn't worth living if we can't laugh. I mean, it's just, for me.
I've been given permission for one more question.
They're so interesting.
Way in the back.
Oh.
I have a question. First of all, the book is really good and really thoughtful.
Thank you.
I just listened to these other 2 questions, and it's fascinating to me how parents, except for myself, are flawed, and how we pass this on to our kids. And somehow from that flaw, many times they will develop these strengths, as obviously you and your siblings develop. And the fact that you can forgive your parents and see they did the best they could. You can only hope that your kids will do that with you also. But my question is, with your book, so you came to this conclusion, you did a lot of work on yourself. And what about your siblings, like Jim? And I know when you saw it, you must have seen the book before she passed, correct?
My sister,
Yeah.
Louise, yes. Well, I didn't tell my sibling, yes, she did. I didn't tell, Harold had died, I didn't tell Louise or Jimmy about it until it was done and I decided to publish it. Because they're both writers, or not necessarily published, but they write and they write well. I didn't want to add their internal criticism, their voices to the chorus. I already had a really loud internal critic. And I wanted the memoir to be my experience, my story of how my family, the family dynamic affected me. I wasn't doing a biography of the family or a profile, and I was afraid if I talked to them, I was going to start to get sort of confused and I'd incorporate their stories. And I also, if you tell me read the book, I really do leave their stories out. I talk a lot about Harold. I just didn't think it was fair because someday I thought they would want to tell their own, and I didn't want to, jump the gun there and try to tell their stories for them. And so I told them with great trepidation, and another thing for which I am so grateful and felt like Grace, my sibling, Louise and Jim, were so supportive. It was unbelievable. And Louise became my greatest cheerleader, and then she suddenly, unexpectedly passed away. So it was really poignant. So in a way, the starting point of it's sort of bookended by grief, because it was partially the death of my brother and that thank you note that got me to start writing. And then once I decided to publish and it was all done, my sister didn't live to see it published. So, so there's, I feel very close to my siblings, and they were extremely supportive, and I'm very grateful. Really grateful. And I can't say that 20 years ago it would have been the case, but somehow we'd all evolved, and I was really lucky.
It's great. It's great. A wonderful note to end on. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Susan, thank you.
Amy and Susie, thank you, really, for bringing
Thank you.
your story, but not only your story, your craft into the room. And I love how Susie really tried to bring that out. It's not just the story, it's about how she shaped the story into the book that now other people will be able to help them in their healing process going forward. So we really thank you for that. We have a lot of books here, and they make a great present in case you already have one. You can buy one for someone. We just want to put that out there. And I'd like to just mention that tomorrow at the bookstore at 5 o'clock, we have Professor Fred Gardefay, who will be talking, continuing our Steinbeck series. He will be talking about the Grapes of Wrath and also Steinbeck's portrayal of Italians and Italian Americans in his work, as well as comparing it to Christ in Concrete, written by Pietro Di Donato, who is an Italian writer who lived on Long Island. And both stories, Grapes and Christ in Concrete, are about the working class and the abuse of the working class in America. So join us tomorrow, and then Skip Rayback, a local writer, will be with us actually on the 30th, on Friday the 30th. He's a short story writer, viewed from Louse Point. But we're really thrilled to inaugurate our Canio's, what will be a tradition perhaps at the Christ Episcopal Church. We thank our close, and we hope you all come back to other readings over the course of the year. Let's give another real round. So if you have a book, maybe we'll set her up at the table here, and you can get the books in the back, or actually